The idea here advanced in this course is to expose the students to the very foundation of organization and administrative theory, and then the relevance of that and the theoretical underpinning that has sought to explain the very origin and the very foundation of organization and where this course derives its existence from. And in the course of that, we have been able to look closely at various scholarly postulations that have sought to explain the ideas that revolve around organization and its administrative components, and how well these theories have sought to explain contemporary practice of administration. And we have equally looked at how relevant these theories are in the explanation of the internal processes and the chain of command system that exists within an organization. And we have looked at how the aspects of administrative ideas are factored into the establishment of public enterprises and the relevance of these public enterprises to modern day society. And also, in today's lecture, our emphasis would be on the internal workings of organization that is built around personnel organization and the challenges that exist within the organization when one considers issues of personnel and the types of personnel organization that exist within the system. And if you remember in our last lecture, we were able to establish the relationship that exists between the board type of command and the bureau type of command. So in today's lecture, we would be looking at other intricate parts of this arrangement that drives how organization functions and the type of system that is embedded in every organization and how well the employers and the employees relate with the external environment. And all this is built around the idea of personnel organization. So personnel organization in itself makes more sense when looked at holistically from a combination of both the internal elements of an organization and its external environment, and how the synergy that exists between these factors cumulatively broadens the idea that revolves around organizational theory and administration and the internal workings of both private and public enterprises. So in today's lecture, we say that the problem of personnel organization are the most important to elucidate on in the entire discussion of administration. So you can see that the relevance of this particular topic cannot be in general terms what is expected when one looks at issues of personnel administration and when one the internal working system and the mechanism put in place, be it from the angle of the chain of command or the structure that shows the extent to which superiors and subordinates relate in an organization is built, and the types that exist and which will be exposed to as we make progress. It is the most complex and it presents needs a careful analysis. Other problems of public administration are easy and simple on account of the fact that they concern only the employer. But the personnel problem is concerned not only with the employer, but equally with the. I earlier made mention of the relevance of this particular topic built around the internal and external workings of the organization. In other words, how the internal composition of or the structure is public posture and how the employees of such an organization and the employers in themselves manage their external environment. So general public is concerned in the sense that it wants a system of personnel wherein all citizens will have an equal opportunity to enter the government service and rise to higher grades on the basis of talent and qualifications. You know, when we talk about public administration, the best that comes to mind is built around the fact that it revolves around the government system in themselves, what concerns the entire. See that it presents an entry level into government arrangements or into public enterprises as well. So personnel organization as a topic is all encompassing and reflects the ideas that is built into both the recruitment process, the internal working systems, the external environmental relationship that the organization maintains with the public. And in line with that, we say that in this unit, we shall make an attempt to give an analysis of the problem of personnel organization. Here is not to examine the specific problem of personnel in details, but to lay the foundation for the more detailed consideration of these problems in the succeeding unit. We should be able to identify types of personnel system, list their respective characteristics, and state the merits and demerits of the respective types of personnel system. Our discussion on public enterprises and the relevance of the board and the bureau type, which to a large hierarchical structure and the chain of command that exists in terms of leader. On the fact that as we make progress in this course, you would also see other attributes, flow of information, and the personnel system that exists in every system being invested in an individual or in a board of persons or we will now see from a broader perspective the various types of personnel system that exist with internal working system of an organization. And we say that different types of personnel system, the world over, has been adopted as there are a range of options, and countries tend to settle per time the one they consider most appropriate. Or a departure from each of the various personnel systems that we'll be looking at, which means therefore that no single be most appropriate, but rather a combination of aspects makes more meaning and tends to oil the wheel of progress that exists in an organization beyond the aspect of laying emphasis on a particular approach. It therefore means that various approaches sometimes coincide or pursuit of the best system that suits the organization or the country per se. And when one talks about country or makes reference to country in this case, the country thrives on an administrative system as well. And that is why we have the categorization of some countries being built around democratic tenets, others being built around the aristocratic tenets. And this, when narrowed down to the internal workings of organizations, they reflect the extent to which decisions are made within the confines of the system. The different countries at different times have followed different systems. This is because of the fact that conditions differ in various countries, and the same country are three distinct types of personnel system, namely bureaucratic, aristocratic. Looked at from the broader perspective of the internal workings of a country, you would find these systems in place. And when you narrow it to how you find these systems in place, so you should not get confused when you see these names being mentioned. It simply refers to how the organization is being communicated from the highest authority to the lowest. Make progress, you will understand better. So we say that there is the bureaucratic system. Much misunderstanding exists in regard to the system. In a broader sense, the term is used to describe any person in a system of administration composed of a hierarchy and the likes. Divisions, bureaus, department functions, and the like. In this sense, there is nothing wrong with the system, and the prejudice against it are unfortunate. In a much more restricted sense, the term is used to denote a body of public servants organized outside the sphere of effective public control. Let me pause here and explain something. You know, there is this idea that comes to mind of students and even scholars of this discipline of public administration, that when you hear of bureaucracy, it is a system built around a delayed pattern of information or a hierarchical structure that tends to, or a slow pattern of administrative arrangements. But that is not entirely the case. The idea built around process of information flow that exists within the system and the extent around it and how they get the job done of referring to subordinates in the flow of information. The civil service sometimes reflects these ideas, and various countries or existence in terms of how the administrative structure is built with the system is termed as bureaucratic from this standpoint. The characteristics of the bureau system or Prussian type of administration is to be treated differently from bureaucratic personnel. Bureaucracy tends to show a step-by-step charge of duties or in how administrative principles are carried out within an organization. If the former is a necessary concomitant to a large-scale organization, the latter is a pure recruitment pattern adopted by the imperialistic government of the past. As such, it may be used synonymously with aristocratic system. This is trying to give an understanding of a divide between the bureaucratic personnel system, but the underlying principle that connects the two is premised on the fact that it is built around how information flows from subordinates to superior in a gradual process. How the operationalization of an organization can be guaranteed. In other words, the day-to-day activities or the management system that exists within an organization or within the broader system, as we have made reference to, is how information flows and how the system is managed within the confines of an internal working arrangement. Its characteristics are the service owe their appointment to the king and are responsible to him. That is looking at the angle of the autocratic personnel system and relating it to the broader category on. The various types that we mentioned, ranging from bureaucratic type to aristocratic type to democratic type, can equally show how a country is built around a governing system and can be narrowed to how an organization functions. So if you look closely at an organization, you'll be able to discern which idea is used in the management principle that exists in such an organization. And then we say that there are some systems that is built around kingship arrangements, that a few persons relate with the system as having a king in charge, and information flows from the highest authority to the lowest ladder, supreme. So when you find that within the confines of the governing system that relates to a country, it can be attributed to an aristocratic type. And if you narrow it to how organizations function, it can now be viewed from the angle as the bureau type, pardon me, that we mentioned in the last class, that information is vested in where the individual reigns as the highest authority within the system. So this is that information flows from the king down to the down to the lowest employee in the ladder or in the hierarchy of the tenure, as they can be dismissed only by the king. In other words, decision can only be taken by the. So if it's a kingship arrangement, as can be looked at monarchical and lay claim to monarchy, the highest position in the those at the lowest ladder of authority. So also within the flows from the chief executive to those at the lowest rung of the ladder. The king makes his autocratic rule effective through these services. It constitutes a distinct career as those of military and naval establishments. Special provision exists for their education, training, and regular education of their positions. So what this is simply saying is that it exists a pattern of authority that flows from the highest position to the lowest, and with very little opening for discretionary arrangement or a little space for the employees to either accept or refuse such to the information that is handed down or the authority that is handed down. And then special emphasis is placed on the military, for instance, or or other establishments that have such a structure that the democratic principles or debates between the staff before such information is arrived at. In other words, this tends to show some level of flow, which means that the highest position within such an arrangement is the custodian of information and then the final authority when it comes to decision making. Comparison of this as we make progress with other systems like the democratic system or the aristocratic system as the case. We said that prior to Nigeria's independence, the Nigeria civil service and other services were organized on the basis of the review system because both their recruitment and dismissal were in the hands of kings to obtain the king. Aspects of being looked at from the country's perspective. If you reduce it to how organization functions, and where you have the chief executive as defined, built around where leadership position is vested in an individual, you would find that whatever decision is to be taken within that, or the level of acceptability by the highest authority within the system. That is why in some arrangement, the chief, in others, you have a board that takes decision and then submits such decision to the final authority to also verify. Such a situation, the final position is not where the authority resides. But within this bureaucratic arrangement, it's the final authority and mostly it's vested in an individual. As said above, such a system, being responsible to themselves as superior to the people. In such circumstances, the relation between the master and slave arrangement. So if you look at what we have been trying to say so far, the final authority decides on what happens within the system, and every other person is obey the instructions and decisions of whoever is in charge or is the final authority within the system. It's not only perform executive but also legislative and judicial functions. This is born out of the fact that the public service in Nigeria in pre-independence days, who held membership of and governors, were nominated to the legislative assemblies and were also appointed on high judicial posts. In other words, within this arrangement, that the king or the chief executive can decide certain persons to play specific roles which cuts across different layers of government or different internal structural arrangements. So it therefore means the decision is not a situation where people can deliberate on, but must always obey how the authority is handed down by the highest position. Advantage of this system, there are three advantages of this system. That is the bureaucratic type that reflects. At first, this system produces the highest degree of efficiency. It brings skilled mind to the solution of the argument of the board and the review type. That when information or authority is vested, that tends to reflect efficiency, owing to the fact without recourse to other aspects or other forms of authority that exist within the system. And meet emergency situations when the information or the leadership position is vested in an individual and would not have to be solved aspect of deliberations here and there. And we said that it brings skilled mind to the solution of technical problems. In other words, an individual who is be accorded other roles to be played in the overall interest of the system. Unlike the democratic type that we will look at later on, that requires a lot of deliberations from those that are the employees or the citizens, as the case may be, when one relates to the country arrangement. Second, pressure. Remember, we talked about the tyrannical arrangement that exists within this system, where a king or a final authority is vested in able to abuse and can lead to political suppression when such a situation is used. Its will effective on the people through this system. In other words, in as much as it is built around an individual, it can be a tool for greater mobilization and efficiency, and equally can be abused when I exhibit excessive powers in how decisions are taken, which we organize on bureaucratic principles. So there is a hierarchy of structure and a chain of command that often. Third is that it secures unity and concentration of power that are very essential for effective administration. So the arrangement here that to be an individual, and whatever the individual decides, it's what happens within the system, presents a system that can flow easily. So there is a unity and concentration of power. People are not at liberty to disagree with this. Whatever information is handed down. Take, for instance, for those of you that information comes from the highest position in the organization, or for maybe rejection or position, as the case may be, you are to obey and not disagree with whatever. Here, the argument of this autocratic arrangement is built upon. That we say is outweighs its advantages. And we say that first, the system practically has no place under democratic setup of control. Like I was saying earlier on, there's no room for inputs of ideas or discretionary arrangement from the employees or from those at the lower. You are just to obey and follow the final authority that is handed to you in such a arrangement. The present trend is towards active participation of the people in the administration, carry people along with them. So what this statement is trying to say is that if you look at the world today, there is the to be deliberated on, and everyone is carried along the process of decision making. Unlike this arrangement that hands arrangement authority cannot be challenged and other contrary views are not entertained. The public concede to their needs. So in other words, what this statement is trying to say is that the world has gone, or public administration has gone from this era of making inputs or being at liberty to accept or disagree. You are just to come. The system now in contemporary situation has evolved beyond that stage. First class, when we looked at the scientific management theory, we were able to establish the fact that the scientific beings working as machines within the system is not. Relations theory is what we find in most organizations now, where the attention, the individual is built as the core of what has evolved. Public administration has evolved beyond where, as though it is a tyrannical arrangement. People relate to the external environment with the public as best, and within the internal arrangement also taking inputs from the employees in the interest of all and sundry. With the second, other classes of the society. This tends to, when information is diffused, it therefore promotes a organization can have its external environment. But where it is a streamlined pattern that everybody must conform to, and its external environment. develop an overbearing attitude towards the people. So this is one of the disadvantages. An individual becomes too powerful within the system, abuse the power, and subordinates, and as such, not take their inputs to be relevant within the system. The disadvantages that exist within this autocratic arrangement. This era used to be giving special training in mannerism and etiquette, suffer from a sort of superiority complex. This did not prove useful in the ultimate, both for the public and the government. Arrangement is subject to a lot of abuses that can take place. In instances, you find people that work in certain aspects of the or considering themselves as more relevant in the system than even those that are in lesser organizations or even with the public. Within itself seeds of its own destruction. All the flaws of militarism are present in not only unresponsive, but also turns them hostile to the common man. Such a confrontation results in the end of this type of personnel system. So if you look at this closely, it further goes to show the point that we have been trying to make. There is the tendency for abuse, and for such an individual to feel superior to the system, and in most cases become very snobbish and hostility towards the system. And again, the external environment in turn, because of how that for the public, there is the tendency that the public will also react in a very negative fashion, and that is why its own destruction. So in other words, because it does not give regards to other components that make up, equally show their own disregard for the system, and in all, it becomes a. So the world has moved beyond the practice of information down as though the other subordinate units are inferior to the system. Public officials and the head of the administration turns them into tyrants. This now ends. Still in furtherance of what we have been trying to point out, that in as much as this situations and can reflect a high level of efficiency, can show a system that disregards every other arrangement that is built around it. The idea that information is considered to be from a higher authority to other support. The fact that this system has been used by the ambitious rulers like the Roman Emperor or British imperialists to suppress individuals. This system in the democratic age is out of date. So you can see that the argument built around this boils down to the fact that it is susceptible to abuse and does not carry the, but the interest is built around how information flows from a single individual that has the tendency information should flow and for every other person to carry it along. So the statement here, autocratic rulers have existed, and when you narrow it down to how organizations function, it reflects a high degree of abuse and disregard that make up the system in general. So it is not entirely the best system that should be practiced when one considers the age of democracy and the world that we live in now. So from this earliest form of administrative arrangement to a more composed arrangement where each individual and everybody within the system has a role to play. So modern day reflects a high degree of regard for the system in general, be it within or external. Aristocratic system The word aristocracy, which is the second element beyond the one we have discussed earlier on. Remember, we have looked at the bureaucratic type and we related it to the autocratic system as well. And then now it's the aristocratic type as well. The word aristocracy means government by the noble. This aristocratic system began and developed in England and was later adopted by other Western countries. Under this system, a distinction is made between different grades of personnel and strictly restricted. The appointment to the higher class, like the post of secretaries, is not made through a competitive examination, but depends on the discretion of the chief executive. So this tends to show a correlation between what we discussed earlier on. But the beauty of this shows the fact that is built around the fact that there are other subordinate arrangements that are equally relevant to the system. So in as much as the chief executive is the final arbiter of authority within the system, there are advisory bodies that exist, unlike the first one that does not have those kind of advisory bodies. And if you remember the last lecture where we made a comparison between the bureaucratic and the board type, that's the bureau type and the board type of leadership within the system, you would find that we discovered that the board type has other advisory bodies that guide the decision-making of the chief executive. But the bureau type shows that an individual is the final arbiter of authority within the system. So this aristocratic type also is a kingship arrangement that shows that some persons, that's why they are referred to as nobles that exist within the system, can equally make decisions and make appointments within the system as well. So when you narrow that to how organizations function beyond the country level to how organizations function, you will find a system where there are advisory boards. That is why you have boards that guides the affairs of an organization. Like we hear in Nigeria today, you can have a parastatal and have boards of those parastatals. These are individuals that are charged with some executive powers also to guide the decision of the person that is the final authority. So in other words, whatever decision is taken, sometimes the opinion of the board would be put into consideration. And that is why it's described as an aristocratic system where information or the confines of administration is built around the decision-making of the nobles that make up the arrangement. So we say that this theory, the theory is that the qualification required of this class is of personal character. It is not so much administrative experience as general administrative capacity, which is more expected from these officers who have to cooperate with the minister. Hence, they are known as administrative chiefs. The relationship between them and the appointing authority is personal in nature, and the latter should have wide discretionary powers in making their selection. Though they are usually appointed from among the administrative officials, they may be appointed from outside also. Secretaries and deputy secretaries. In England, they are permanent under secretaries and assistants. To show that the administrative chief or the head in this instance that can enable such a person to appoint other persons within the system or even outside perform governmental functions as well. So in terms of its practicality, shows how, take for instance, some organizations are appointed in Nigeria, that the chief executive can pick any person in charge of some positions that may not necessarily reflect the hierarchical structure that is built in terms of how promotion is to be made or how appointment and recruitment is to be made. We have seen that happen here in so many instances, that a minister, for instance, or like the secretary of the government of the federation or the president, as the case may be, can appoint certain individuals to man certain positions in the overall interest of the system as premised on the discretion of the chief executive or the appointing authority. So in other words, when you look at this aristocratic arrangement, most times the pre-qualification for such laying claim to kingship arrangement as well, or at the discretion of the chief executive, And when you relate it to how political parties function, you can see that party loyalists or faithfuls are appointed to certain positions of authority at the discretion of the chief executive without consideration of those that have been in the system beforehand. That is why you can have a minister picked from anywhere and made the head of an organization, even though there are people that must have put in so many years of service within the system. So advantages of the aristocratic system. First, it beautifully combines the principles of representative government with efficient government. And if you look at this, it therefore means that if and very competent hands are recruited into the system, it can guide the levels of efficiency and the result orientation that is expected within the system. The minister, who is a political chief executive, represents a popular feature of administration, while the secretary, who has acquired that position after long training and experience, represents his expert character. Remember, we made mention earlier on of how a person can be put in charge of an organization with a ladder through the hierarchical arrangement, and that within this system, if capable hands are selected and they partner effectively with those that have grown through the ladder, you can have an efficient system. Also, if the reverse is the case, then it will be a chaotic arrangement. This harmonious combination of popular sovereignty with expertness policy often results in efficiency and accuracy, which is the point I was trying to make earlier on, that if the right caliber of persons are recruited or appointed to man such positions, and they now participate effectively and partner with the already existing hierarchical system within the organization, there will be a high level of efficiency within the system, because when used in the right aspect, very quality and competent hands can be appointed to man such positions of authority. Second, the discretion given to the minister in selecting the administrative personnel helps in maintaining harmonious relationship between them and the officers, who are men of broad vision, high creative intellect, and general mental culture. Still in line with the first discussion, that when the right persons are appointed to man such positions, they can produce effective results if they partner effectively with those that have grown through the ladder and have gotten to positions of authority through training and through examinations and other arrangements that have gotten them to the positions that they occupy. So in other words, there is always the need to emphasize a synergy between the external environment and those that can be brought from the external environment with the internal workings of the system. And together, you can have efficient arrangement. These qualities are more essential than the technical expertness for higher administrative posts. Technical expertness, it is claimed, develops a stereotype mentality and myopic vision, whereas the breadth of outlook and general mental culture enable the administrator to have a grasp of the administrative activities as a whole. It does not, however, mean that the system is hostile to expertness. It only emphasizes the need for top management being manned by administrators having vision and creative intellect. What this is trying to say is that when such appointments are made and the right caliber of persons are brought in, and then the system that they are to manage have an arrangement that is devoid of hostility, there is bound to be more results, because when the chief executive uses his discretion to appoint very competent, you would find that the system would be very efficient. And the expertness of those that would advise, like take for instance, when a minister is brought in, you have permanent secretaries and directors that may have grown through the ladder, serving as advisory bodies to such a minister, even though the minister may have brought in without the requisite expertness and training of going through the ladder. Such a minister can collaborate with the existing arrangement, and effective management decisions can be made in the interest of the system. This system is that the system has been dubbed as highly undemocratic, as it creates class rather than a representative civil service. What this statement is simply trying to say is that imagine when you must have put in, say, 20, 30, 15 years in service, and then somebody is brought from the external environment to come and superintend over the affairs of such an organization. There is the tendency that people will feel being shortchanged or not carried along effectively. So it is subject to abuse, and it is undemocratic when one considers the fact that training and other aspects is required for other persons to go through the ladder, and somebody can be brought on the account of being a party faithful or being close to the position of authority to be the head of such an institution. So the argument here is that this system, because it does not choose its leadership within its internal workings, sometimes appears very undemocratic. And we say administrative class is drawn from higher strategic society, executive from the middle class, and clerical and others from the lower and middle class. Second, it is pointed out that it creates a class of conservative-minded administrators who are not prepared to effect radical reforms in the country. Such officers are misfit under socialist government. What this statement is trying to make boils to the fact that when these individuals are brought in from the external environment with little knowledge of the internal workings of the system, sometimes it does not augur well with the overall interest of the system, because those that understand the system sometimes are not carried along, and the arrangements that they come in with sometimes to a large extent become a clog in the wheel of progress that can be made in the system. So it is best that people that are very vast in knowledge within the internal workings of the system are considered first for such positions of authority before they are thrown open to the general public. However, under the system, that is not always the case, and that is one of the pitfalls of this aristocratic type. Third, low age limit is the target of criticism. It is contended that low age limits debars people hailing from rural areas from opting for such services. The state should draw talent from all possible sources. Likewise, every individual should have equal opportunities of serving their nation if they have the talent. The argument also here is that there are certain positions that certain age limits are placed on them for people to come in. But when you are coming on the premise or at discretion of the chief executive or from certain arrangements that is built around this aristocratic type, this age limit is not always factored into consideration. It is remarked that the recruitment qualifications enable the state to recruit the service of laymen rather than experts. Still in line with the argument we're trying to make, that sometimes, if not used in the proper channel, the system risks having people that are of low experience and low training as compared to those that have grown and have put in so many years of service. So you risk having a chief executive or a minister or a director in some positions that does not have the requisite knowledge to man such positions, the requisite experience and expertise to man such positions. So there's a tendency that people with less experience can be made superior under this arrangement, and to a large extent is susceptible to abuse of the system. It is not economical to train such raw recruits at the expense of the state. Lastly, the system is said to be undemocratic as it prevents the lower grade employees from getting promoted to higher administrative posts. What this is trying to make is that when people are brought to become chief executive without considerations to those that must have put in so many years of service in the system, it creates this feeling of apathy or lack of involvement in the system, because after having put so many years in service, somebody can just be brought in and be made the head of such an arrangement. So to a large extent, it is undemocratic, and it does not give adequate room for those that have gone through the ladder to get to the highest position of authority within the system. And we say here that, however, most of these points of criticism are not wholly valid. The defects pointed out above can easily be minimized or avoided. The class correspondence between the civil service and the society may be arbitrated if a wide variety of subjects in the competitive examination is provided. So, if you look at this system closely, apart from the fact that you risk having less qualified persons manning positions of authority, the system also spends more when you bring these people in and now decide to train them to have the knowledge that those that have put in so many years in the service are exposed to. In other words, it therefore means that when people are brought from the outside, they do not have the requisite knowledge to man positions that they are exposed to. And that to a large extent becomes a challenge that those that have gone through the land grant always feel marginalized and not given the opportunity to go to the highest position of authority. So it is not always the best arrangement, but the combination of these arrangements will large extent can provide the desired results within the system. Likewise, in inclusion of liberal scholarship, in inclusion of liberal scholarship, students belonging to poor families to equip themselves with the requisite recruitment qualification, it is not essential that the civil service drawn from the aristocratic families will be opposed to radical reforms. Had it been so, nationalization of iron and steel industries would have been successfully carried out by the British civil service with the advent of Labour government in 1945. What this statement is trying to make is that if you are not from a privileged arrangement or a privileged family or a position of authority within the system, you risk not ever being in position of authority under this aristocratic arrangement. In other words, if you are not close to the seat of power, or if you are not considered qualified by the system itself, you cannot become the custodian of authority, or you cannot hold the highest position within the system. So now, the democratic system. When one hears democracy, what comes to mind, what readily comes to mind, is built around the fact that it provides a level playing ground for every individual to participate. Everyone is carried along within the system. And when you narrow down to the internal workings of the system, you will find that within the confines of the democratic arrangement, all staff, both the employers and the employees and the public, have equal rights to participate in the system. People can be brought in from outside on the premise of the right knowledge and right qualification to be part of the system. There is a level playing arrangement that guarantees that those at the entry level can equally rise to become the highest authority within the system. So it is built around the principles of core democracy, where everyone participates effectively in the system. The USA has opted for a new type of system. It is based upon democratic principles. No one man has any more intrinsic rights to official station than the other. So if you look at this statement closely and you juxtapose that with the earlier discussions on the bureaucratic type and the aristocratic type, you would find that this system gives every individual the opportunity to grow to the position of authority within the system. As against the earliest ones that we have mentioned, where the chief executive exercises discretionary powers and can bring anybody from anywhere and give such a person positions of authority within the system. Its main features are a right to, its main features are the system is immune from class division. An employee may join at the lowest rung of administrative hierarchical ladder and attain ultimately the highest position, which further boils down to the fact that we have mentioned earlier on that it gives room for everybody to succeed within the system. Promotions are based on objective tests, these efficiency ratings, and rating scales. As such, there's no restriction for an individual from one class to another, unlike the one that we looked at earlier on, where anybody can be handpicked without consideration for the system and be made to hold positions of authority. And we say that educational qualifications at the initial start of the service are not of liberal and general nature. Instead, higher specialized qualifications are required for such jobs. The public service is not a lifelong career. Any person can enter government service at any stage and leave it whenever he likes. What the statement is simply trying to say is that it presents the individual or the employee the opportunity to make the decisions. You are not held down by whatever a principle is handed by the highest position within the organization, that you are at liberty to make your own decisions. You can decide to leave the organization, you can decide to be part of the organization, and at the height of it all is that you can grow from the lowest position to the highest position of authority within the system. The system is built around the fact that your qualification is considered, the level of expertise you have is considered, and it is based on the most qualified person to hold positions of authority. In as much as people can grow from the lowest position to the highest position, it reflects the extent of the professionalism and the expertise such an individual is charged within the system. Advantage of the democratic system. It is based upon merit system rather than on birth or wealth. Remember the aristocratic type, we said that positions are given to people on the premise of their affiliation to the noble class within the system, or are based on the recognition of the chief executive by exercising his discretionary rights, can appoint anybody and make the person the head of such an institution. So under this democratic system, it is entirely based on merit and not on the levels of exposure that the person has, the chief executive or to the highest position in the land. Thus, it provides equal opportunities to all, merit being the sole criterion for selection. It is based on justice and fair play. Secondly, is that it provides incentive to efficient work as there is no limit to promotions, which means that people can actually go to highest position from an entry level to highest position in the organization. Through hard work, any employee can reach the highest place. Comparatively, the British system provides less incentives to employees as promotion in this system are neither highly restricted or completely non-existent. So the discussion here is built around the fact that people are not restricted by any barrier, but by the extent of the qualification they have and the extent of the work and the effort they put into the system, that they can grow from the least position to the highest position in the system. Since age restriction is not there, the system provides a larger scope for selecting the talent, more capable and more mature persons may be appointed for higher positions. Fourthly, it not only suits the genius of the Americans, but fits into the social and economic setup of the American life. Private jobs in the USA is more lucrative. As such, it is more alluring. Hence, employees cannot be compelled to stick to government jobs throughout their lives. So there is a high level of flexibility within the system that you can be in the private organization and move into the government, and can equally be in the government and move out of the government to a private arrangement. The beauty of it is built around the fact that it gives some measure of flexibility and that individuals have the opportunity to do as they wish with the system protecting their rights. In other words, it shows an arrangement that the individual is considered very relevant and not disregarded like the previous discussions we have had on the aristocratic arrangement. It is more economical as the state saves the training cost. Ambitious employees will get training in the industries where they seek jobs. After equipping themselves with the requisite experience, they may fit into higher government jobs, having better prospects and higher remuneration. What this statement is trying to say is that the system on its own, because of its democratic nature, and based on the fact that people are employed on the basis of merit and their capabilities, that the system saves more money, unlike bringing inexperienced people and then spending so much money in training them to understand how the job is being done. We have seen situations where very less qualified persons are given positions of authority within organizations as we know it in this country. Lastly, though not the least, the appeals to the conscience of democracy and democracy-loving people, as it is based upon the democratic principle that every citizen is equally entitled to public office. So if you look at the argument and you relate it to the earliest discussions on the two other types of the aristocrat, which is the bureaucratic or the aristocratic type and the aristocratic type, you will now find that the individual or the citizen within this democratic type has the right to grow within the ranks if such an individual puts in the best and passes exams and trainings that are set for the individual within the system. So there is a merit arrangement that exists within the system, and every person can actually go through the ladder to the highest position of authority. Then the disadvantage that exists within the system is that it emphasizes too much specialization in public administration, and as such, it can create a stereotype mentality and a myopic vision. Administration with broader vision and general outlook are not procured in this system. Another defect of the system, as it prevails in the US, is that the top management is placed in the hands of amateurs who hold tenured posts. It amounts to overburdening of the bureau chiefs, the highest permanent officers in the system. The latter cannot cope with the onerous duties, as on the one hand, they lack qualities of general administrators, or on the other hand, their departmental and interdepartmental cognitive duties, their managerial activities, and the help they have to render in the completion of policies are too exact. Their stereotype conception of administration makes the mess of the whole system. What this statement is trying to make is that in as much as the beauty is built around the fact that individuals can go through the ranks and get positions of authority, it can also propel individuals that are less qualified to having positions of authority within the system. That because it is not subjected to the discretionary and selective powers of the chief executive. Any person can get into the system on the premise of merit without requisite knowledge that can propel such a person to discharge his duties effectively. So, owing to the fact that it presents an opportunity for everybody to thrive within the system, sometimes where the discretion of the chief executives in choosing very qualified hands is required, the democratic system can relegate that to the background. So what that means is that people can actually get into the system, but may not be as efficient as when selected by the chief executive. So in other words, there are also advantages in the aristocratic and the autocratic type that we have looked at that does not entirely reflect the benefits of democratic principles and practices. So we have seen situations where some countries that have shown a tyrannical leadership have fared better than where democracy reigns supreme. Take Singapore, for instance. At some point, Singapore was able to pursue effective development because they had a chief executive that used his discretionary powers to appoint very competent hands. And we have seen countries where they lay claim to democracies and people that are less qualified are picked to handle positions of authority, and most times they subject such positions to abuses and make a mess of the entire system. So that is what this bill is trying to make, that people, in as much as democracy is built around giving level playing ground to every person's tribe, sometimes it can also be subjected to abuses of having the wrong persons managing positions of authority, as against when they are chosen at the discretionary powers of the highest position of authority in the system. So in conclusion, we have analyzed the advantages and disadvantages of the three systems. We found that from a purely technical efficient standpoint, the autocratic publicity system is probably the best. Still in furtherance of the argument I was trying to make earlier on, that sometimes when the chief executive looks at a person and considers the pedigree of such a person and the extent of the qualification of such a person and the technical expertise such a person is exposed to, the chief executive can bring such a person to the system and the person would function effectively, as against the merit arrangement of everybody coming to have a level playing ground and strive for positions of authority. So what this statement is trying to make is that from a purely technical and efficient standpoint, the autocratic or democratic system is probably the best, as they can have the best person brought into the system from the external environment. However, from purely political standpoint, some of its features are so objectionable as they more than counterbalance its advantages. As between the British aristocratic and the American democratic system, it is believed that the technical efficiency consideration is the one to be preferred. The British system is advantageous in the sense that all positions of superior importance are held by men equipped with liberal education and who have chosen public service as a permanent career. However, the system is effective in the sense that it closes doors of advancement to employees in the lower ranks. Comparatively, in democratic system as prevailed in USA and Nigeria respectively, men enter the service at the lowest level and rise to the highest cadre. The federal service abounds in examples of men entering the service at the bottom and rising to the higher administrative post. So this is more like a comparison of what exists in the bureaucratic and the autocratic arrangement as against what exists within the democratic arrangement. And the statement is emphatical when it says that the administrative arrangement within the bureaucratic structure or the democratic structure can have men of high quality and expertise brought in, as compared to having everybody trying to struggle and having a level playing ground as opined within the confines of democratic discussions. So in other words, one can say clearly that these systems sometimes overlap, and not one particular system can be held as the most effective, but the combination of these various administrative principles can guarantee an effective and more functional system when compared to laying claim to a single arrangement. So you can have a system that is built around democratic tenets, but has elements of autocratic decision making and bureaucratic decision making as well. So, in other words, a combination of one or two of these variables, or the three of them entirely, can guarantee an effective system compared to when it's built around a single structure. So in summary, whether the British aristocratic system or the American democratic system, the general public is concerned just with a system of personnel, wherein all citizens will have an equal opportunity to enter the government service and rise to higher grades on the basis of talent and qualification. They just want an opportunity to develop their God-given potentials. So whether the democratic arrangement or the aristocratic arrangement or the democratic arrangement, the aim and the objective of the system is to guarantee what brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of persons within the system. In other words, the concern is about how effective or how efficient the system can be pursued and how the opportunities can be presented to all and sundry to thrive within the system. So having said that, we will be rounding up the lecture here. And like I said, you can bring up your questions on the WhatsApp group and make contributions to the class as well. So for now, I think we have almost exhausted our time, but a minute or two can be given for anybody that has questions to ask or make contributions. So the floor is open now. Those that are online can actually, I think, okay, Salako is the person that we have. Do you have any question or any contributions to make, please?
No, sir.
Okay. So when you read through and there are questions or contributions, you can also revert to the WhatsApp for more discussions there.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.